Welcome to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier, and I am your host. I am coming to you from my home via Zoom. The pandemic has exposed local and national governments' limited ability to address social justice, hunger, and economic necessities. The lack of preparedness creates a greater dependency on nonprofit organizations. Today, my two guests will comment from their experiences working in the nonprofit world and the arts. My first guest is Tiffany Turner. She's the Executive Director for nonprofit Prince George's County. Tiffany will share insight in working in civil rights, addressing racial inequities, and understanding the community's cultural makeup. My second guest is Lynn Arden, CEO of Black Rock Center for the Arts. Lynn will share how the pandemic has affected the arts, the importance of the arts, and the impact on the artistic community. Both guests will briefly address the issue of being under-resourced and funded, which is so important. Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us here on Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
So these are tough times. Everything is crazy. You know, we have the pandemic that we're continuing to deal with. It's not a story that has ended or will end anytime soon, I don't think. And then we have, you know, the social justice issue that really has exposed the fact that, you know, civil rights and the issues of liberties and equality are ongoing. It's as if the civil rights movement, you could say, almost didn't happen. So why don't you share with us what your experience has been for Prince George's County and your work, your good work with the nonprofit?
Sure, thank you. A lot of people have talked about COVID-19, and there's been this conversation that these disparities exist because of COVID-19, when actually COVID-19 has only shown a spotlight on the disparities that have already existed. And so they've been here. And so when you take the health pandemic that we've been dealing with globally and how so many countries, I mean, across the globe have been affected and have had to shut down and alter how they've done business. And then you add on top of that the racial unrest that has been happening, not just in this country, but now it is taking place where people are showing solidarity across the globe. That is something that, you know, people are thinking that this is something that's new, but I really believe, again, COVID-19, with everyone being in a place where we were quarantined or, you know, so much had to slow down, it forced everyone's attention into a space that already was happening. So this has been going on, and
no, I mean, when you look at the roll call of all the African Americans that have been murdered by police, it's not something that's just been happening in the last couple months. I mean, this is something that goes way back.
And it's not just, you know, we talk about law enforcement, but it's about, you know, systems of inequity. So These racial inequities have been built into these systems, you know, quite candidly, since this land was taken from and stolen from indigenous people. So since this land was colonized, these systems have been built in. You know, Black people were written into the Constitution as 3/5 human being. And this document is one that has been protected with such, you know, ferociousness by people, but yet and for all that same level of protection doesn't apply to individual human beings. That's very problematic.
Very, and what I find striking is that, you know, it shows a lack of humanity, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. There is no question of that. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking 300 years ago or whatever, but no, there's no excuse now. And so what is it that is so hard for the police to understand that deadly force should be absolutely the last resort, and not, you know, not when someone is tasered, or not when a man, you know, writes a bad check, or you know, I mean, I don't understand.
So I think that's part of the issue. I think that police departments do already understand. They do understand that deadly force should be a last resort. We saw that with the case of Dylan Roof, when he went into a church and he slaughtered people while they were praying for him, and he left. And when he was captured after that horrendous crime, he was not killed.
Right.
They actually went and got him fast food. after that had happened. So it's not that law enforcement doesn't understand that deadly force should not be used as a last resort. It's that there are some law enforcement officials that believe that people of color, and I like to be racially explicit, Black and brown people do not deserve the same type of treatment. And so they use those internal biases and external racism to exert this type of behavior, because there's never been any type of accountability for hundreds of years. So
Right.
when you can go back and look to post-slavery, immediately after the period of enslavement happened in this country, you had people that their whole job and responsibility was to catch and to round up formerly enslaved people and to re-enslave them into places where they did not into places where they didn't have any way to get out. Even though the law said one thing, the enforcement of the law was another.
And what I find interesting is that, we're talking about these incidents that are horrible, but I think it's the little nicks through time that accumulate that can bleed a person out. And examples I'm thinking of is, access to healthcare, access to services, access to a job, to be able to get paid a fair wage. I mean, it's so much beyond just the end result, which is horrible. But I seem to think that if we can start with fixing all the little things, we can get there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, and I agree with you. Again, talking about systems, we talk about law enforcement, we talk about criminal justice, we talk about healthcare, education, housing. All of these systems, there are some racial inequities that are built into the very foundations of how these systems interact and engage with people of color, particularly Black and or brown people in this country. So.
And the cultural awareness, because not every Black person is got the same background. I mean, I from a Latina perspective, I'm from South America. Culturally, I don't have very much similar to folks from Central America or Mexico. I mean, I never had a taco until I was, a teenager in the United States. I didn't know what one was.
Well, I think that piece is so important. When I like to call it cultural responsiveness. A lot of people say cultural competency, but I identify as a Black woman and I'm not even fully competent within that space. It's something that's fully growing and evolving every single day. And I too, my mother's family is from Guyana, which is in South America, and they typically identify more with the Caribbean islands in terms of culture, tradition, foods and all of those things. But if you take that same, my mother's side of the family and my father's family that's from North Carolina, two completely different experiences with systems, with this country, with opportunity, and looking at generational trauma, what that looks like. It's very, very different. And so I think that those things we have to take into account, especially when you're providing services. And when you look at what COVID-19, what it has exposed, is that a lot of organizations particularly organizations that are led by Black or brown people, are underfunded and under-resourced. So we have less staff typically than our counterparts, our mainstream counterparts, that are oftentimes doing some of the same work in the same communities. So less staff, less funding, significantly less funding. And then the expectation is that you're still needing to provide quality service. So Prince George's County has led the Washington metropolitan region in terms of COVID-19 deaths and infections. So there is something about that, but yet and for all, our community still needs these resources. So when we're looking at what emergency funding looks like and where the funding should go, Prince George's County should be at the top of that list. And yet and for all, it's still very challenging to be able to apply for, report on, and provide the necessary documentation for a lot of our nonprofits to receive the necessary funding when they're still doing emergency direct service provision.
Well, and one thing that struck me, you were mentioning that, the 211 line is only in one language. And as you were saying, you have a community that is multilingual. And so, how does someone call for assistance and then because of language barrier really, can't assess or get the information for the services they need?
Yes, and I will say that one of the things that stood out to me, and I brought that to their attention, and so that's a conversation that we're having, and so I'm excited that they're hearing and listening and looking at how does that get implemented, because language access is huge, especially again when we're talking about Prince George's County, where you have 62% Black, 22% Latinx, 12% white, and when you say Black has so many subcultures underneath that, right? So you still have, Afro-Latina, you have Afro-Caribbean, you have African immigrant and African American. So that, accessing services in a way that is culturally responsive and in a way that's accessible is important.
Yes, I agree with you on that. And that's fantastic news that they are listening. I mean, I know that your county executive is pretty fantastic and is going to get a lot done. What do you see for the future for the nonprofits working in Maryland? What are some of the challenges they're going to be facing? Because, like you said, COVID isn't going anywhere. We've got the social justice issues that are going to be, again, it's a long-term road to travel to repair and improve and fix. So what do you see as?
I see the fact that this pivoting to a digital age and providing services digitally, that has been this conversation that you keep hearing over and over. And although it is extremely important and it's necessary, it definitely should not be a supplement. It should not be in replace of the way that people have typically communicated, because at the end of the day, there are still cultural considerations that you have to keep in mind. And some people, when you're talking about not trusting systems, technology is also a space where some people have not necessarily been trusting of technology and how technology reaches into community and extracts information. So I think it's just really going to be a long road in terms of communicating and educating our community and really being able to galvanize all of our nonprofits to be able to speak to what our issues are and get the necessary funding and actually have the seat at the table to talk about, hey, this is another way that you could make this system a little bit better, where it could be more responsive to the community that I'm currently serving. So that's one of the things that we at Nonprofit Prince George's County, we're actively working on, is rolling out a series of initiatives in response to the racial uprisings and unrest that's currently happening. So we don't want to just talk about it. This moment is meant for us to be a movement to continue this conversation and not let it slow down and figure out where we all can play a part.
So that would mean that the role of nonprofits in advocacy.
Exactly.
Okay. So we have about a minute or so left. What are some points that you would like our audience to keep in mind when thinking about Prince George's County and nonprofit for Prince George's County?
Thank you. I would say that when thinking about nonprofit Prince George's County and any organization, being mindful of not speaking for a community, but going and reaching out to those communities and have them speak for themselves. That's extremely important. And I've seen where we've had this huge push where a lot of mainstream organizations that have the resources are moving to try to be at the forefront of having the conversation, but the conversations are not always in spaces where the necessary people should be at the table. And yet again, this perpetuates the same cycle that we're talking about. So it's not necessarily helpful, but can potentially be harmful. So I think that's the main thing I'd like to stress. And for more information, they can go to our website at nonprofitpgc.org to find out about our initiatives.
Say the website one more time.
It's nonprofitpgc.org.
Awesome. So everybody remember that. Check it out because you need to be involved. It's your community. You need to be at the table. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you for having me.
So now we're going to switch over to our second guest, who's Lynn Ardent, and she's the CEO of Black Rock Centers for the Arts in Upcounty, Germantown. Lynn, thank you for being with us and joining us on the show.
Thank you, Mariana. I'm honored to be here. I'm very excited to be here, actually, without a mask, too.
I know. Well, I have to tell you, I love Black Rock. And I love the fact that you're in Up County. I can park, I can get there. And plus, it's such a gem. And I'm not sure how aware everyone is of Black Rock. So I wanted you to come on and share what it is, the Black Rock Center for the Arts, but also to talk about how are the arts dealing with this pandemic?
Well, that's a loaded question. So Black Rock Center for the Arts, it's a cultural arts center. We're located in the heart of Germantown. It was started almost 20 years ago as Germantown was built. And as the community was planned, and one of the core elements that the planners wanted was a cultural arts center. So Up County, Germantown, in the past 20 years has built up around it. And for those of you who have not been here, I invite you to come one day when we can actually serve as a cultural arts center once again in the way we would hope and have. But we have two beautiful galleries. We have extraordinary art galleries that every couple weeks we rotate the art. Wonderful, wonderful exhibits. Starting in July, it'll be the Baltimore Watercolor Society's exhibit,
wow.
which will now be a virtual exhibit. We have a very, very strong education program, arts education program with seasonal classes, fall, winter, spring, in all genres, acting, painting, drawing, music. We have for serious students, a year-long conservatory in violin and piano and it's a hub of activity normally. And we also have two stages, beautiful, beautiful stages with year-round performances.
And you guys have a wonderful New Year's Eve party.
We have a wonderful New Year's Eve party. Exactly. So our team is new. When I came on board, we talked last fall with this great team about connecting more with the community, and immediately became involved with the Oktoberfest. And we were the hub for the parade and had a community art day. And at the holiday time, we opened our doors, and it was so wonderful because we planned it quickly with our new director of education, and we had 3 choirs from local schools, and we opened up the house to our community, and families brought their children, and then they made snowflakes. Remember the paper snowflakes?
Yeah.
And had hot chocolate and cookies, and we sang songs, and it was lovely. So we serving our community, which is so diverse and young, is a big part of our role. When COVID-19 hit, it was devastating to Black Rock as an arts organization, and it's devastating to all the arts organizations across Montgomery County. And you are aware of how rich we are in culture, and the Olney Theater, Roundhouse Theater, ArtStream, Arts on the Block. The list is long of throughout this county of these incredible resources. Everyone immediately has to shut their doors. We can't have performances. The arts are the first to experience such an impact, and bear the greatest as far as business, and will be the last to reopen if you look at the phasing in. Entertainment venues are down at the end of the list.
Well, and not only that, but so you guys are shut down, but that means the artists depend on these showings and performances are really impacted. I remember my mom was like telling me, there's no way you're going into the arts, you're going to starve. Right. And I think that's a reality right now for those artists and performers.
It is, and that is something of great concern to everybody, that artists are not able to work at all. And what's really ironic about it is we turn to the arts to get us through a difficult time. If you think about the art and the signs that people are carrying today in the protest movement, it's arts that tell the story. When we look back, on this period of time in the future, art will tell people that aren't reading a book about what happened during this time. So they're so important to our society.
Right.
We're all trying to figure out how to support artists, how to keep our arts organizations viable for what could be another couple months, another year. What does a performance look like one day? What does an art exhibit look like? So I think, along with many others, our first job is to figure out how to transition to a virtual platform. So for each of for education and for our performances, we immediately, our team became very creative. On the education side, our director is an artist herself, and she a voice background, but she's also very in tune to the need of local artists, and she's working with teaching artists to bring them on for private classes and small sessions.
And I'm sure that's really helpful to show, one thing that whether you're an artist, a small business or whatever, is the flexibility to pivot when you need to because of a crisis or a situation, whether it's in your life and personal or it's something that's a lot larger like the pandemic.
Flexibility and pivot are our two main words we use a lot these days.
Who would have thought?
We have, and they've done a great job in creating an online education program with teaching artists that's very diverse, with soul emotion. We have a Bollywood class. We have a great yoga class. All local artists, except for we do have one new teacher we're excited about, a performer, Joshua Davis, who had come. He had a great performance, and he's actually going to be a music teacher for us online.
Oh, that's great.
So that's exciting. One of the first things we did was our quotable quarantine art exhibit for youth. And we had 155 entries from kindergarten through 12th grade. And the children submitted a piece of art with a quote about what the quarantine meant to them. It's all online. It was quite extraordinary.
So everyone should go check it out. What's the website if the audience would like to go see the kids' artwork?
It's blackrockcenter.org, and you can go to Beyond Blackrock and see what we've done already. You can see about our new summer program with Blackrock in a Box. It's an arts lesson in a box that kids and their families can work on together. So that's a
lot of stuff. And Lynn, I know there's never enough time on these shows, but I wanted to touch really quick on the hub,
right,
that BlackRock opened, because that wasn't county funded or any governmental thing. That was you guys at BlackRock with partners getting donations to feed Germantown.
Right. It started really because Grace Rivera Open called up one day, literally the Monday after we closed our doors, to say, can you open up? There's a large produce donation from a nonprofit that needs to be repackaged to go to the mobile home community that's like a mile away. Within days, we became a hub, and essentially it's an incredible model. We have dry perishable goods, we've non-perishable goods, we've added all sorts of things that families need, that the most vulnerable families in our community, families that have fallen below the safety net. And we now serve 300 to 500 families every week, and it's in a very safe and efficient way. So it's food packages. Then we found families need diapers, so diapers have been added. The calls after about 2 weeks started coming in from families that had COVID-19 in their homes.
Oh.
And so you're not going to deliver a box of food with milk and things to a family that's sick. So we found out in those boxes it should be Gatorade, masks, thermometers, crackers, soup, a special box for families really coping with the illness. There are activity kits, age-appropriate activity kits that the Blair Foundation donated, and now KindWorks is helping to create. We actually ran low, and the only families that got the boxes were families who had a death in the family. So
That's amazing. Sad, but amazing. And I want to thank you, Grace, as well. She's one of the producers of this show, actually, for stepping up and doing this. I'm sure it wasn't easy and it was hard and emotional, but thank you so much for doing that, Lynn. And I hope you'll agree to come back to be on the show in the future.
Anytime. I appreciate the opportunity. I
Awesome.
really do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So I would like to thank my guests for joining me today and the audience for watching. Please join me next week at the same time or watch the show on our YouTube channel. I'm Mariana Cordier. Goodbye.
Bye, Marianne.